Today we're going to learn how to take apart your robot fighting alien destroyer pistol. But first, we dexter. So now that we're ready, first thing we got to do is take apart the pistol, and I'm going to leave links in the description to all of the cleaning supplies that I use and the oil that I use. The oil is actually really important, but there's a couple things that I think make cleaning guns a lot easier. Triangular Q-tips. A female shooter friend turned me onto these. These things are absolutely essential. If you don't have a bore snake, get yourself a bore snake. And I use the modern Spartan Systems kit, but really it's just the carbon destroyer and the accuracy oil that I use out of the kit. Having some picks and scrapers can be useful too, so I got a plastic one and I got a brass one, so let's get started. First thing you want to do when you take the gun apart is obviously make sure there's no magazine and there's nothing in the chamber. Visually and physically inspect that it is empty. So once you verified the pistol is clear, you want to make sure that the hammer is indeed cocked. You're going to go to the front of the pistol and you're going to push in on the pin to pull this captured pin out on the, I'm just going to call it the rib, I'm not sure what it is. You can push on the back of it. You can kind of get on either side of that pin, or you can push right on the pin, and you just kind of push until the rib kind of pops off. Then you pull the slide to the rear a little bit and lift, and then the whole thing is going to come off. At this point, you've got your piston and recoil spring, and the gun is basically field stripped. To take apart the rib, you just pull it forward, and at this point, you can see right there, that is the hammer that is actually hitting the back of the, you can see kind of the breech face on the back of the slide. I don't know if you can see that there, but that is the breech face, and that is the world's smallest firing pin that little hammer is going to hit. Since it's a gas gun, the rules are a little bit different with how we go about it, but I'm gonna use the carbon destroyer just on a paper towel. And I'm just gonna wipe all of the contact areas clean to clean them up a little bit. The bottom side of the slide, you're gonna wanna get that nice and clean because that is a contact point. The underside of all of this, I mean, because it's using gas to move the darn thing, there is just a ton of carbon that is going to be inside the thing. One area that is in particular interest in how the gun operates is going to be the barrel, so we're going to want to get the barrel nice and clean. So I'm going to get on there with the paper towel till I can't reach anything because I have fat, sausagey fingers. Then I'm going to grab one of my triangular Q-tips and finish the job and detail clean around the edges that I can't get my fingers onto. I'm going to have to get some more solvent on the Q-tip and get after it. Under the gas port, it gets pretty nasty, pretty gnarly. I can use my little Q-tip to get down inside the frame. It's not really doing anything that far that's not essential to the pistol. There's not any movement going on right there, but because I can see there's buildup, I might as well. I'm gonna get my scraper and get some of this carbon off the barrel there just for giggles. Put some solvent on the bore snake and fish the snake through the barrel a few times. Since the barrel is fixed in the frame, having a bore snake is very useful. It's easier to use than your typical jag and patches. So yet again, bore snake proves to be super useful. One area that's also useful to get is the feed ramp that is built into the frame. That is going to catch a lot of gas because as the pistol operates, it just deposits a ton of carbon down there. One thing when you're shooting an alien pistol that's interesting, if you shoot it in a match and you're unloading partially spent magazines, you'll notice that the rounds that you put back in your ammo case are a slightly different color because the brass has been smoked by the gas that the gun uses to operate, which is kind of neat. I'm going to use a brush to kind of clean up the ramp a little bit. Next, I'm going to clean up the plunger, piston, whatever you care to call it. And I'm actually going to take apart the recoil spring. So there's a trick to taking apart the recoil spring. You might wear eye protection. I'm just going to lean back, but you compress the spring and you just pull the piston to the right and then slowly take the spring off the guide rod. So we're going to clean up the guide rod as well. There is a little ring at the bottom of the guide rod. You do not want to lose this ring. You can't get another one without talking to the folks at Alien. They've got them. But if you lose the ring, you're going to be in trouble if you're getting ready for a match or something. All right, so first I'm just going to take the paper towel and try and get as much of the carbon off the piston as I can, and because I'm using a decent solvent, should be getting a lot of it off there. The brush is really the MVP for cleaning up the piston. You can clean up the underside while I'm waiting for the piston to soak in with the solvent. I'm just going to clean up the underside of the rib here and get any of the carbon that's up there off. This is not a moving part, but this is just general gun cleanliness. It's not really necessary to make the gun work. I'm going to use the pick to very gently scrape the carbon and break it loose around each one of the little flanges on the piston. Make sure that we're getting it nice and loose. It's not essential necessarily to make the gun work, but while we're in here, we might as well get it clean. So cleaning the piston is kind of a bear. This is a borrowed gun, so I'm not going to spend the time I would as if it was my gun. Let's talk about oiling it and reassembling it. Now, before we reassemble the pistol, we need to understand that there are no slide rails. The gun is not held in lockup by like any locking lugs or anything like that. It's purely just the piston. And there are basically 3 spots that you're going to want to lubricate using a thin film of oil, not a heavy film or anything like that. And if you use something that's like a light grease, it can attract even more carbon than what you see with what I got going on here. So first thing we're gonna wanna do is just put a drop of oil on the guide rod so the spring moves nice and easily back and forth. Again, pay attention not to lose that little ring at the bottom of the rod. We'll just wipe off kind of the excess there. We don't want it to be too much. Put a drop on the top of the barrel. I'm just going to grab a Q-tip and just spread that all around. Really, it's just the top of the barrel that we're concerned with because that's where it's making contact with the bottom of the piston. We're going to want to put a drop of lube on the bottom of the piston and just kind of work that in so that there is a thin film of oil. If you just put a little drop right here at the back of the frame, and work that in, the slide assembly will sit on the back of the frame a little bit. It is a contact area and the finish does kind of wear out there. And similarly, you're going to want to hit the mating surfaces on the slide with a drop of oil. Just a nice film, just spread it out there. So now we're going to reassemble the pistol. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get the recoil spring on the guide rod. We're going to put it on and we're going to compress it to expose the notch at the top of the guide rod. With the Dexter gloves on, that's a little bit challenging, but then we're going to slide in the piston so that the spring captures the piston at the top of the assembly. Next, we're going to want to put the rib back into the slide, and the way that we do that is we're just going to kind of force it in there. The hammer is going to have to clear the slide, so you just push the hammer and compress it as it slides past the little bit right there to get into the slide, and that's what it's going to look like when it is fully assembled. We're going to make sure that our piston and guide rod are seated in the right spot, and you can see right there that it's going in, sliding nicely. Okay, that all looks good. And you're going to take the slide. When you reassemble, you're going to look at the inside of the slide right there at the front. That is going to hook onto the front of the piston assembly right there. So we're going to want to use one thumb to keep the recoil spring and the piston aligned where it's supposed to be on the barrel, which it is. And we're going to take the slide assembly. We're just going to try and hook the front of that piston and pull the slide to the rear. If we got the slide to the rear, it's looking good. Now the rib, we're just going to kind of hammer into place. And once you can close it, there we go. Gun is put back together. It is cleaned and it is oiled. Trigger is functional. Trigger resets. So there you go. Be sure and check out my review on this gun. If you haven't already, you can watch that here.